Good evening, folks, and welcome to FMA Discussion. This is episode 498, and tonight we'll be featuring Professor James Shepard, and we'll be covering his martial arts journey, how he segued in FMA, what he thinks about FMA, and that he's also kind of under Kelly Warden, and also, most importantly, we're going to be going touching upon his book, his future project coming out, and what he wants to cover in that, and the significance and impact that it will hopefully have on the martial arts community. So without further ado, I'll be bringing them up. If you're watching, tell us where you're watching from. Smash that like button. If you got questions, as always, put them in the right-hand side, and I will get to them as I see them. All right, here we go. Hey there, how are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
So, martial arts background. So, let's before we get into FMA, like, where'd you start, and what is it?
Okay, so I started in 2007. Summer '07. I went to KS Chen's Hapkido schools in Chicago on the South Side. He's one of the oldest Hapkido practitioners in the Midwest. But it's funny. I actually met him in his school years ago when I was a kid, and wanted to do it. And my parents were like, "No, you're gonna get hurt like in the Karate Kid." So I didn't get to do it until I got to get out of the house and pay for it myself when I was in college. So I did that. And so I started Hapkido, and I trained in the summers when I was back home in Chicago, and then practice it during the year. When I moved to Indiana for grad school, I got my master's in counseling and counselor education from Indiana University, community focused track. There's a school track and a community track. I got hooked up with the IU Hapkido Self Defense Club and did the rest of my ranks through about brown belt through there. And then while I was at the IU Hapkido Club, that was a much more eclectic presentation than what I had like in Chicago under like the strict Korean kind of mindset. And there was stick and knife and hanbo and some other stuff in there where a cane where we're using weapons. And one day my buddy of mine said, "Hey, you want to come to FMA class? Because like you're doing all the stick and knife stuff in Hapkido, defense wise, and we have some movement drills where we use stick and knife." And so I happened on to a modern art East class with Jason Gearhart, who's my first modern art East instructor. It was really fun. It was just showed me a whole other world, and so I was really interested in that. And then I took a break from grad school just for mental health reasons about a year later, and I started training under not just the IU club, but my eventual instructor I got my black belts under, Brian Robertson, who was a direct student of Don Burns. He was the head of the IU martial arts program for many, many, many years. Very good judo, hapkido, taekwondo guy. Anyway, about 2013, I kind of, I just gotten done with my temporary black belt in Hapkido, like just did the test, and my instructor for NSI rolled in, I should say future instructor, and he was like, "That was some cool knife stuff. Do you want to see how to use it, or like see how it runs?" And I was just like, "What is this guy talking about?" And so he told me to stay for his class. It was right after that Hapkido class, and proceeded to just like, unload, knife info. And I'm just like, I need to learn more of this stuff. And so I ran with him. That's how I got connected to NSI and Datu Kelly. That was in 2013. And so I studied under him, and, we train every week, and I still did my Hapkido stuff. And I also picked up Taekwondo too. Also did some of the Inasana Lacoste blend as well. In 2016, us as a group got under Tuan Mel Tortle for PTK, doing that as well. So now, juggling two, FMA arts, and, ran with Mel for a good long time. We're still tight, whatnot, just haven't been able to cross paths as much since the pandemic. But yeah, like I got a lot of good stuff out of that. Just adding to another spoke to the wheel, as, Kelly would say. And when, got my full instructor in NSI in 2019. I got my apprentice in 2017, and I got my black belt in Hapkido in 2015, and I'm up for my fourth dan in a couple weeks. but yeah, I just kind of kept progressing, kept picking up new things. Especially with the NSI, and because it's very collective and not, even though I'd say it's very rooted in modern East, it has a lot of other influence as well. So we're not bound by one particular style. Where it's more about understanding concepts and principles and expression. Modern East is kind of the base, but it's not the prescription per se. So we,
I like that.
yeah. So we have a lot of guys in NSI who are, I'm thinking of some of the other full instructors and senior instructors. We have guys who are PTK, we have guys who are SIAC, we have guys who are Balintawak, we have guys who are all of those, in various things. And, people come from other arts, to the camp just to get the experience, because it's not just about the, again, a style specific thing and, do what the rubber stamp says. It's like, what can you bring to the table? What are you getting out of it? How can you connect it to your system? And, the slogan is connecting the system. So, for me, that was huge, because with my ADHD brain, I'm always story webbing everything. So I'm like, this is a home for me. Because I can, instead of like having to be like super parsing every little detail apart in like an exclusionary way, it's like, how do they relate, or how can I make this connection to strengthen my training? So when I'm training like an FMA drill, I can apply it to my Taekwondo, or I can apply it to my Hapkido, or now I can apply it to my Balintawak. So, or my PTK, or whatever I'm doing. So, that was really good. Got my full instructor 3 in 2022. I'm currently working through the levels in Balintawak, about to go to World Camp with Jim Bobby. Love seeing him anytime I can see him. And just, keeping learning. That's my thing. So.
No, that's great. We got some folks jumping in saying hello. We got GM Ray Floro, Renee, and Hartica. He must have moved from Toronto area. Yeah. We got Brent from Georgia, and we got Eric O'Brien. All right, folks, if you're watching, yes, tell where you're watching from. Okay, so let's go just back up a bit. Hapkido. So you were first kind of exposed to stick, knife, and Hapkido. When you went to FMA, what were some of the noticeable difference you saw in compare and contrast to the weaponization of Hapkido versus FMA?
That's a good question. So I'm trying to think how early in the podcast do I want to offend people, just as a joke.
No, believe me, offensive kindly has taken place here, but kind of done respectfully. So
no, I just I say that in jest. No, it's just one where, with the Hapkido group that I came up with when I moved to Indiana and was at Indiana University, Dang Bong is the way I love it. Yep, that little short stick. Every instructor that I had for Hapkido cross-trained FMA, every single one.
Interesting. I would have never guessed that.
Because the martial arts. So the interesting thing about Indiana University is it is the largest, I think the second largest martial arts program in the country.
Is that right?
Behind UCLA.
I was going to say California would probably have the first.
And the guy who runs the UCLA program, Paul McCarthy, with Cognitive Colleague, he came from IU. I actually know Paul, and talked to him, off and on over the years with the different things that came up, or across paths. But yeah, Paul was an IU, Hapkido, Taekwondo, FMA person, and when he moved out in California, he really hit the
I've had him on the show with his cognitive.
Hit the Inasano and Muay Thai and other stuff really hard, but like he's a homegrown IU Hapkido person. So with that mindset, we were not, like I said, we weren't exclusionary to where we said we're practicing Hapkido and just Hapkido. Our motto in the club was, and even for like the federation, the United States Hapkido Federation, we say if it works, it's good Hapkido. So especially when you consider the history of Hapkido, when it first developed, Choi Young-sul, the founder, he didn't even have a name for it when he first started. It was Young-sul Choi. I forgot what the next word of it was, but it was basically like named after him in a way of just like, this is just kind of his way, or kind of he taught by the technique. And, it wasn't until the late 50s, early 60s that you started seeing people wanting to systemize it. And a lot of people credit, what's his name? Jian Jae for the word Hapkido, because Young-sul Choi never named it. But he had a systematic grouping of techniques, and the rumor is he taught by the technique, and he'd teach you by doing it to you and breaking you, and then you had to reverse engineer it and come back to him when you had it. So it was one where, because it had that, that was the base of it, was it wasn't super stylistically bound, but it was, technical proficiency, in the same spirit. It's sort of like, if it works and we can incorporate it, if it's fitting with our kind of strategies and tactics and movement principles, we'll use it. So, our system is very eclectic in that manner, and that it's not, like I said, it's not exclusionary or just strict to the Korean style. We definitely have a very strong traditional element, but we are very, very aggressive about staying relevant in a practical sense. So, we've incorporated groundwork over the years. We've incorporated weapon defense over the years. We do stick, knife, and gun defense, but it's, when we get new information, we don't, say the old way was better. We're like, okay, what's here? What can we pull that's useful? And then move from there. And it's, I feel like FMA does that a lot in many systems, where someone learned from another person and they said, hey, I found a way that works better for me. Maybe someone else will find it works well for them.
We call that in FMA borrowing.
Yeah. So, that was the nature of the learning.
Borrower did.
And cross training was encouraged. And because we did that, what are the key do and don'ts of your system? Key do and don'ts. I say,
how's he come up with this stuff like right off the top of his head?
I say that key do and don'ts are move your feet. Don't sit and rock 'em, sock 'em. Hapkido is a soft art, so it's one where it's not like Taekwondo, where it's as rooted, even though it does have those moments in it. But I say good Taekwondo also isn't the rock 'em, sock 'em, stay in deep stance. I have a strong feeling about that.
I've always been. I don't know much about Hapkido.
Mm-hmm.
But outside lens looking in, it seems like it's this locking there, where I don't see, like, for instance, like the other, Taekwondo or Tang Soo Do, heavily kicking oriented. And I'm not saying Hapkido doesn't have kicks.
It has it. We just don't.
It doesn't seem as prevalent as the other two. Yeah.
So we treat the high kicks and the jumping stuff as training vehicles, because really you're going to use a low kick. This is what we
That's what I mean. It seems like when I look at it from outside looking in, again, like I have done, like I reached second degree in Taekwondo way back, so I knew the forms, the kicks. Mm-hmm. I can't, not to say I can do them now. Yeah. However, though, when I looked at Hapkido, it just seems like it seemed to be, again, from surface level, like more like really in the functional aspect, the hands-on, you know what I mean, self-defense oriented, tactile, and
Yeah. And I think just the biggest thing, Hapkido has three main principles: harmony, circle, and water. And they all intertwine. And I could go on a long tangent on what those mean, but basically, you're flowing. And so for me, what FMA brought to the Hapkido table was the flow. Because even though best all around martial art, and I've been doing Hapkido for 17 years.
For GM Ray to say that.
And I'm like, man, that's a bold statement. I'm often, I like the vehicles that a lot of the arts give, but I'm not afraid to be critical of them either, because that lets you learn and grow. But it's one where, I think with the tie to FMA, FMA is all about flow. It's about using both sides of the body. It's about, functional footwork. So it's not just, fancy dance, but it's, you've got to not be there or not be there. You got to get in or get out. Or if you're Arnis, you're moving forward and taking up the space and shifting. And if you're Balenta Walk, you're in tight. If you're PTK, you're in and out. There's all sorts of different strategy and tactics of the different arts. And I think with FMA and Hapkido in particular, because Hapkido is so sensitivity based and connection based, and you are moving in a coordinated way. Hapkido means the art of coordinated power. And so you're moving in a coordinated way to impact them the most that you can to gain an advantageous position, not just of position to control, but gaining positional control. And that's a principle of NSI, is positional control. So, I'm listing NSI principles here, but they're very big in Hapkido, is, that attachment, adhesion, transition, and then, kind of having translation of principles is not just, here's something that's similar between the two, but can you tie this empty hand work to stick work? Can you tie this stick work to knife work? Can you tie this knife work to Muay Thai? all sorts of things like that. So, the way I teach, I'm very much always telling people, instead of like, this art just does this way, I'm like, oh, well, this is where they do it in your art, or this is why your art does it differently, because there's different strategy and tactic involved, but there might be a core concept underneath there, technically, that can marry the two in use, or say like, hey, this little difference will make yours better, because then you're going to
sound like Kelly Warden.
I go back with him a good minute, so I didn't meet him until 2016.
But it makes sense though, because I mean, in a good way.
Beforehand, yeah. But I mean, NSI just really vibed with me well, and it's kind of how my brain works, and tattoos.
No, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So
that's just kind of my fabric. I think I call even Hapkido is my oldest art. I think the philosophy that's in NSI is really at my core, and everything else is a spoke in that core.
Yeah, I remember him.
There are vehicles to get there, and I use different arts concepts and strategies to just apply. Figure out, how do I use this stuff. I don't want to do a billion reps and be like, that was a dance. I want to be able to know like how does it work. So
yeah, interesting. So with FMA, not all, but most or more should do. Sparring, dueling, like in Aikido, would you guys, we're going back with aspects to the knife and stick in Aikido, did you guys spar and duel kind of like what FMA does as far as?
So yeah, it was very controlled in the sense when we got to weapons. We used rattan sticks for our training sticks. We never used padded sticks. I didn't get introduced into a padded stick until I actually got more into FMA. All the training weapons were like rattan or hardwood, or our hanbo was hardwood. Our knives were aluminum trainers, and I didn't know what a tack knife or a knock knife or all these other ones that were a little bit safer were until years later. And I'm like, this is cool, and this is nice for beginners to not kill themselves. But back in the day, it was that was what you had. But what it was it gave a lot of feedback. Just don't grab a Hapkido's wrist. I think it's usually not a good idea to grab a Hapkido person, because that's what they want you to do.
That's what they thrive on, right?
That's what they want you to do. But yeah, you don't strike.
You gave them the cohesion. Now they're just gonna run with it.
Yeah, grapple them on the ground, keep them on stand up, out of their grappling range is how you do that. But I think it's good to know the holes in your art, because then it lets you know what to plug up. But yeah, the training element, especially with knife, like when you're working with an aluminum trainer, you're seeing that metal, you're feeling that stab come in. We're not like throwing such a percentage where we're killing each other, but like if you missed a angle 5 stab, like straight up the middle, and got hit, you knew it. If you were getting a slash coming in, because it was that first, you felt it across the forearms, or if you missed the grab, or you felt it wherever you were. And so we often trained like, don't do wrist out, make sure you're, exposing the less all that stuff. A lot of that came from, I believe, most of the instructors that were in charge at that time, and even continually now, all do FMA cross training. And so we're like, hey, we've got a weapon in our system. I don't want to know just how to defend against it. I need to know how to use it so I can think of more defenses. Because we say it's Hapkido / self-defense, because the two really go together. But for me, the grabbing on the wrist and doing the locking from that is very it's building reference points. But when we get to brown belt in our system, we stop doing locks from the wrist. Everything is either elbow shoulder if it's a grab, or a lapel. And we have a separate scenario of acquiring locks from a disengaged position. So we're in striking range or kicking range, and we have to make entries to do different locks. And we increase the number as the belts go up. And then when we get to temp black, which is right before black, you have to do a specialized lock, which means someone will attach in any way, same side wrist, elbow, shoulder, lapel, cross side, same thing. They grab you wherever. You can get to a specific lock from any grab. You might have to flow to it, but you have to get to it. So you have that spontaneity. If you don't know what's coming, and you have to find that flow and the motion and the mechanics of how they are to get to a specific thing. And then your instructor might be, fun and say, I want you to get to this lock that wasn't on your list of specialized stuff, because at black, they'll do that to you. At least that's how our federation runs. And then we also do grab and throw. So it's like you're disengaged. You got to enter with pain, get your grips, get your setup, off balance. Off balance is huge with Hapkido. And then once you have that, you throw them. And the throw can be a lock taken to the ground. It can be a standard judo throw. Don Burns, who started the federation, was I believe a 4th degree or 5th degree judo black belt before he did Hapkido. He was teaching in Japan when he was in the Air Force, and then when he came back to Indiana and was doing martial arts, he learned Taekwondo and Hapkido from Mughal Lee and Ki-Duk Lee. Mughal was a world-class Taekwondo guy, taught to come teach at the U.S., and then Ki-Duk was a Secret Service, Korean Secret Service, guarded the president's wife. At the time he was guarding, an assassination attempt went south and killed everybody but him, and the president's wife died, so he had to skip country or else he was going to get executed. And so he wound up in Bloomington with Mughal and helped teach. But
sounds like Remy Press, what Remy Presses went through.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And, for him, like I said, Mughal knew Hapkido too, but he was world-class Taekwondo. Ki-Duk was the flip. He was good at Taekwondo, but because of his ROK years, he was all about the, how do I bust something, kind of thing. And that was, he was really, he was an interesting guy in that part. And I don't want to speak too much into that, but, let's just say he was not afraid of dojo storming and encouraged it at some points. And as far as people coming in saying, hey, I heard this martial arts stuff don't work, or, do this. And he'd be like, oh, sign waiver. And then next thing you know, they're in the hospital. So
yeah. Now they can't, right? Have no legal. Yeah. So all right, let's go back to Martin. Let's go over to FMA. So Martinese first, then some Asana blend, some Bikini.
Yeah, because I did some. The Asana blend came more from. It was called Martial Concepts. It was under Dr. Jason Winkle. He was the one who founded it, and it was just kind of his take on a lot of different, things he got, because he was an Asana instructor, and he ran Larry Hartzell. He was Larry Hartzell's dude at seminars for years, especially toward the end. He's in Larry Hartzell's books. Well, when he's I know the exercise one that he did for Jeet Kune Do and like grappling. Jason is in the book demoing some of the stuff. Because he's a doctor in kinesiology. But Jason basically did his system off of the Inasano, Lacoste, Kali, as well as with the Inasano kind of lineage and the JKD. But he was very Larry Hartzell influenced.
Yeah, more the grappling and yeah. But I mean, what do you think of Modernese? Like, what influence? I mean, I covered Martinese extensively on here in there, and I mean, obviously, he spread the art like none other. As far as the most practitioners in the world are Martinese practitioners.
Yeah.
So what'd you think of it? I mean, basically, obviously steak based. I mean, what'd you get out of it?
Ooh, that's a big question. Because there's a lot there. It really depends on what. Hi, Skippy. Skippy's my 3-legged cat. But where are you going? You're gonna be on TV. This is Skippy. He's a 3-leg.
Oh, jeez.
He's the goodest boy. But yeah. Anyway, he. I think with my first interaction with modern Arnis was, when I first got introduced to like tappy per se, because I'd never seen that. I'd only seen like big strikes, kind of the 12 angles of the Inasano system. The angles we defended against 1, 2, 5, 12 and Hapkido, kind of just your basic slashes and thrusts. But when I got to that in tight play and that with the shifting directions, because modern East is very forward pressure heavy, but it's not just running through you straight. You watch the really good guys, they're not hanging out. They're moving just offline and then running through you. And they're shifting to keep you on your heels while they're getting momentum until you're just overrun. And, at least as I say, the good guys. There's some modern East people that, kind of cement in the, the ground, feet, but, that's neither here nor there. But, it's one where, I think with my first introduction, it was that in tight play and the flow of techniques and the setups of like, you're not just single direct attack, if we're using JKD terms, but you're putting baits and switches and all these destabilizing entities.
What was the Balintawak at the end, his last Balintawak, the influence from that, his addition of Balintawak?
So, I mean, Remy was a Balintawak guy before.
That's what I mean. That was his last piece he added. I'm wondering if that was what kind of influenced what you're describing there.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about the age at which he did the tappy more. He was older. He couldn't quite move the way he was when he was younger, so it really kind of fit to his strength and his physical capability in that moment. It's hard to do big, using a PTK reference, running big diamond footwork when you're in your 60s.
Yeah, you're doing Tri-V formula.
Yeah.
Like, 80.
Yeah, because I watched, I was at a seminar with GT years ago, and he showed this one reverse grip jumping knife braining somebody in the head, and he was doing it, and he was moving and good. And then we came back from lunch. He took a nap and made us do 1,000 strikes. So
no, I remember those. Yeah, I remember the few times he came to Connecticut, going up and down the floor.
Yeah. There was one time where like, he saw us new guys. And he knew we had trained, but he didn't know what our history was because we weren't wearing any like shirts. And he had everybody go up, and you had to like count so many seconds that you were doing the reps, and then the next person would come in. And we got up. He was just like making us go, and then he'd tap somebody else in to feed us again. So we didn't go out, and we're like, wait, this is backwards. And then my instructor's like, how long do I just, am I going out? And he's like, no, you will stay there till you are dead.
Rich is a major Myronese guy and Balintawak to boot, and he just
Yeah. I think the Balintawak end, with the Arnis part, that's the in-tight shifting that you're getting. I think the Arnis element was, Remy had some longer range stuff in the tank. So there's where you get the shifting with some movement to the Balintawak explosiveness. Because it's definitely, I would say it's very attribute heavy, but it's also, even with that fast movement, it's very sensitivity heavy because you're reacting, you're responding.
Yeah, the offhand use as well.
Yeah, and your offhand is doing things, and it's one where Remy uses offhand a bit more, and then when he wanted to take it to you, put it in his left hand. So there's a lot of left versus right in modern Arnis, and a lot of really cool stuff you can do with that. Particularly with Batsu Kelly, we've got the Sabat that's heavy in the NSI system. So using the 5-foot staff, and we do so much empty hand translation and knife translation with the Sabat. But it's coming down to base like root mechanics.
He's huge in that. Like his translation to other weapons empty hand, like having him on this show, and it was really kind of enlightening the way he verbally articulated and how it comes out like that. You know what I mean? It was really interesting. Like, when did you how did you get involved with him?
So my instructor, so I said I got involved in modern Arnis in around 2011. Didn't necessarily stick with it once I got out of grad school and like took a break for a semester. And I mean, I always kind of stayed in with my instructors who were Hapkido, who also did, the Inisan Holocaust stuff mainly. And one of them did HEMA a lot, German longsword. But anyway, when I kind of came back to wanting to do FMA, it was probably very beginning, like December 2012, January 2013 was when that happened. And like I said, it was really at the end of one of my tests for Hapkido. And, at that point I was a temp black. So I was like right below black belt. I knew I was still a student, but I thought I knew something. And, at temp black, you have a body movement drill where you're using a knife. So it's a knife where you're going cut, check, counter with different footwork. And we have eight directions that we kind of movement patterns that we use in Hapkido. And that was developed by Don Burns to really was implementing judo footwork in line with some of the Hapkido movements to give dynamic movement that you could translate between just using your hands and multiple hands. So like a block, counter, block and feet, kind of like, movement drill with kicking, movement drill with a stick where you're doing a block and then a thrust. And then there was movement drill with cane, then movement drill with a hanbo, then movement drill with stick again, where it's like an angle one, a quick, back shot, and then it was knife for the last one. And so he saw the knife drill and he saw like the knife defense part of my test, and that's where he kind of ribbed me a little bit and says, "You want to really learn how to use it?" And then proceeded to show me some nasty knife work that night. And I'm like, I need to get more into this, because this is, what I thought I was starting to get, more competent in, because I'd reached that level in my system. He was like, you're in a bucket and there's an ocean kind of deal. So I'm like, I want to learn how deep the ocean goes. So that was really what kind of brought me in, and not so much just the knife, but just again the translation of stuff, and
just the way he was explaining it. So then, did you go out to his camps?
So this is from my instructor, Ryan Massett. But I did go to, so I studied for a couple of years, and then I went to my first camp in 2016. I meant to link up with him in 2015, but that was the year that he got, he had the renal failure. So I was supposed to meet him at Modern East Camp in Michigan, and he couldn't make the Modern East Camp because he was in the hospital. And that's where we found out he had the renal failure and the rare cancer, and was getting treated for that. So he was medically out for a while. Still was able to make camp that year. I didn't make camp that year, but the very next year I'm like, I gotta go, because we don't know what's going to happen to Datu. And my goal was teaching. I was learning to teach, and wanted to grow as an instructor. And I'm like, this is the way. This is an organization for teachers kind of thing. So I got in front of him and got to work with him, and it was really good experience. A lot of top level guys out there with the other.
Yeah, he's got quite.
He's got some
organization going. I mean, but his steel and water camp. I mean, they seem pretty exciting. I mean,
and we get people all over the martial arts spectrum coming. So not only in style, but also in experience. We had one guy, there's one woman who was a yellow belt in Taekwondo, had went to one of Jeff Johnsgaard's car seminars, and she was in Montana, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to Water and Steel next week. You should go." And so she just decided, "Yeah, I'm going to go to Water and Steel." Had very little martial arts experience, but she could shoot a gun like a fiend. Like, she was really good with a gun. She was new to martial arts, and so she went to camp and loved it, because Datu was like, "Hey, this?" And he's like, "This block, and this movement, because you're this level." And she's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "So this is what this is. This is the Pala suit. This is the Sinawali pattern, and your traditional movement." And it's just really cool to seeing how one of the big things that I really have taken away from him is being able to see those line familiarization elements and connect it between different seemingly opposite looking systems. You have your FMA is generally very flowy, sometimes explosive, very continuous motion and a lot of motion. And you have more rooted styles that I say they have it. If you've got good eye for it. Because deep stances to me are in connection, but when you're out not holding somebody, you got to be light on your feet. Can't live in back stance. So my Taekwondo looks a bit different than most others. I'm not saying I'm a novel person, but the way I was taught was you got to make it effective and interpret your forms, which is another thing that Datu does really well, is taking the classical stuff that people go, well, that's just a bunch of movements that are maybe like not applicable or disconnected, or people take them as face value, and you're like, no, there's a lot more in there if you have a bit more creativity and understand what body mechanics are being trained. So for that end, that was something that really clicked well with me, coming from some traditional arts into some more into a progressive art, because our Federation Prep Keto is more progressive than traditional, to going into a completely progressive realm with NSI. And then, hooking up with PTK, like, it's one where there's, old battle tactics for modern fields. So, I don't say that, critically, but it's like, there's some lines and ideas in that motion and in the Tri-V and the old Dose and Methodos that can apply for some modern implements. And so, there's there.
So obviously, you spent enough time. So are you, so far as you go now, status quo, you're actually a rep under Dr. Kelly? Because
So
you're
I'm full instructor level 3. So our ranks go. There's colored belts, that follow the standard modern East belt ranks, and then there's apprentice instructor, which is you've gone through the ranks and now you're kind of like a junior teacher. And then once you do your apprentice instructorship, however long that is, it's kind of not just where's just your technique at, but how good of a teacher and a learner are you with that? How are you doing in developing students and conveying the material, your understanding and depth of knowledge, and then from there you move to full instructor. Full instructor is like you have freedom to teach it as you want. You're still technically under people, but you're also like I'm running my own school. So when I got promoted to full instructor, that was when I had been passed on to the school that I taught at with Hapkido and NSI, and they're like, dude, he's doing this, he's bringing up people in the art, he's got some people to blue belt in NSI, and he's got his own school, and they're like, yeah, we should move him up a level. So that's when I got my full instructor 1. And then a few years went by, and just one day, Datu was at camp, was like, yeah, so like, calling a couple people aside, just kind of talk to him for a minute, see where you're at, and that camp, he was kind of pulling a few of us aside on the spot and making us teach things, or someone would ask a question, and you'd be like, they got an answer, and you'd be like, all right, so I got to come off the top of my head for whatever was going on. And it was good because come ready to camp if you're an instructor, because he's gonna call on you at some point.
He's gonna
demo with you, or he's gonna see, he's gonna demo with you, and while he demos with you, he'll demo well enough that everybody else sees the flow of the technique. But while he's demoing with you, he's testing you. So I remember we were doing Chisao one day at camp, and he was showing how to do Chisao, and he touches hands with me, or I should say I touched hands with him, and he, in the first movement of the Chisao, he broke my center line, and he was just like, oh no, don't do that. And then I'm like, and then I like got it back, and he's trying to demo just the Chisao roll that we do, and we're doing it, and the whole time he's trying to throw me off as we're demoing for the camp, but like he's giving me little pressures in different ways. And I've said doing Chisao with Datu is like trying to hold on to a fire hose that you don't know where it's coming from. This is the way that it feels with the sensitivity. And about midway he's just kind of smiling at me. He's like, not bad for an old fuck. And I'm like, pretty cool.
Yeah, I can see a sensitivity being.
Yeah, he's like, just because he's just messing with me the whole time. But we hung with it and demoed it, and people don't necessarily out in the crowd don't feel that or see that. And it's one where you've got a guy who's demoing stuff with you and showing the technique how it's supposed to be done, but he's also, like, at the same time testing you to see where you're at, if you can hang. Mm-hmm. And that camp, he told me, he's like, yeah, like he's I called him up to teach that earlier because I said I wanted to see what he had, but he knows it works. He's a technician, because his instructor Ryan's a technician, so I'm gonna bump him up a level. And then a month or two later, when certificate finally showed up, because I just promoted my guys and he sent my certificate with it, and I'm like, dude, Ryan, this certificate's wrong. And he's like, I'm like, this is a level 3, it should be level 2. And he's like, oh no, Datu said that's where you're at, like, because he was impressed with what you did and your knowledge and application, and he said that's where you should be. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to argue with the 10th Don. So yeah, that's how I got to where I'm at now. So there's 4 levels of full instructor, and then there's senior instructor after that. So senior instructors are kind of like the GMs, teacher's teacher kind of thing.
Jeff, like me. Jeff's been with them. I mean,
so Jeff is a senior instructor. Belton's a senior instructor. Martin Gonzalez is a senior instructor. They're not just instructors. Belton and Martin are state directors or coast directors, and my instructor Ryan, he's the Indiana director of training. So he's kind of the quality control for everything that I do. Just kind of keeping everything honest in a way, and just making sure that the boat's going in the right direction. But the full instructors have freedom to teach. As well. Apprentice instructor, you're still kind of you can teach, but you're probably like building a bit more of the base. And when you're really stable and steady and really show you got it, then you move to full. And then senior, you're bringing up instructors.
You're bringing up people. Wow. So all right. So obviously, so you got your own school.
Mm-hmm.
So far as what you're teaching Datu system?
Yes, I'm teaching NSI. I'm teaching Judo Kwan Taekwondo, United States Hapkido Federation for Hapkido, and then I also teach kickboxing under the NSI banner, but I recently started hooking up with Belton because I'm under him for Balinswalk, and then I'm just like, man, like I really want to get like, my area, like there's lots of great people out here, but just in my part of the state in Indiana, there's no crews. Everybody's kind of like all in the same boat. If we either grew up fighting or grew up learning from someone who learned a ton, and
no official crews.
so no official crews, but a lot of people with a lot of experience. Like my instructor runs Vortex, martial arts in Bloomington. He's been involved in kickboxing or Muay Thai in some shape or form since like 1993, I think. But it's just one where outside of Jeff Westfall and 3 people in Indianapolis, there's not a whole lot of direct Muay Thai lineage. So one day I was just talking to Belton, and he's like, "Oh, like we can work," and I just send him stuff of my guys, and when we can touch hands, we do what we need to do, and so just working with that right now, not in an official capacity, like official, but just kind of building that bridge. And so I teach the kickboxing element under the NSI banner, but for all of my systems, I do try to relate them to one another for people who cross train, because I've got a lot of people who do cross train between those systems in my school. Taekwondo is more geared toward the kids. Kickboxing,
okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Kickboxing and NSI, I gear toward like teens and up. Hapkido, I usually don't teach until you're like 15, just because it's hard on the joints and your weights aren't set yet. So usually 15 is the youngest I like to teach Hapkido. I might teach the self-defense elements younger, but I don't get into a lot of small joint manipulation, till you're mid-teens. And then kickboxing, same thing as teenage usually is what I like to see.
So you're teaching like what age? So obviously kids. So what age?
So I teach as young as 5 and up to as how old you can be and get on the.
Right, so you got kids classes. Yeah. Sounds like you got kids classes, teenage classes, adults. Does that sound about right?
So what's interesting is I do a 5 to 8 year old class on Saturdays, and then I do during the week. There's a transition belt between when you come up from the 5 to 8 year old class to the general class, because the general class is 8 and up. So I have people 8 years old, and I have people in their 60s in the general class. But the unique thing is that the way we teach the little class is, we'll have fun in it, but I teach martial arts in it. It's not just run around and kick a ball. It's
babysitting.
I tell my little kids, I'm like, I want you graduating the daytime, the weekday classes. I want you to have the best fundamentals out of anybody here, because you spent 1 to 3 years doing the basics, really, really well. So, my youngest kids, I'm like, you're going to be pushing the people above you, because you're having a lot more time in before you even see your first test. So you get to be really clean. And the nice thing about it is, because you get that experience, as you progress, you're not taking in new information and completely learning new mechanics. You have a mechanical base that lets you see it a little bit deeper, and it's going to be easier, so you'll run with it a little faster. So I've got some orange belts that are pushing my green belts, and my green belts are pushing my blue belts, kind of thing. And that's exactly the structure that I wanted to kind of put up, not to cheapen the upper ranks, because the upper ranks are definitely solid, but it's more like if I'm not growing as an instructor, my instructors aren't growing and instructing and learning, and we're not successively getting better at teaching each new generation, then we're stagnant. And so there's a statement in Dr. Jason Winkle's book that was about kind of like organizational leadership in kind of like I'm trying to think of the word. Basically, he described his experience working with top tier teams for the military. Like he was the West Point combative instructor for many years as a civilian. Man's got a brilliant technical mind for movement, and very, very awesome defensive tactics instructor for gun and stuff too. But Jason would talk about in that book where he said that he always remembered the West Point training gym had a sign above it that said, "Set the standard, maintain the standard, and excellence is a moving target." And I tell that to my guys. I'm just like, we have a standard. As you go year to year, some of you guys have been here for a long time since we kind of worked the program and did some culture shifts from the old ownership, you see that we're progressively growing, and the younger people are getting it maybe easier than you got it because we're bettering ourselves as teachers.
Yeah.
You're understanding better is lets you give back to them, so we're giving people a better foundation the longer we go. And I mean, it's just a very simple method of how I structure class, and I encourage my other instructors to take take it on, but I don't micromanage. So because I want my people to have a diversity of teaching experience. I don't want it to be a rubber stamp. I want it to be like every instructor brings something to the table, and you hear different ways or slightly different little nuances that help you be more complete. So
no, I mean that. Wow. So how did you? Okay. So with your education background, what made you, I guess, get inclined to where you wanted, as far as the book is concerned? Because
yeah,
where I brought you on here was,
mm-hmm.
I saw your posts
Yes,
and
yes.
you were reaching out. And so what made you, what was the inspiration for the idea of the book?
Oh, my wife and son just got home. They were at church small group, and I was here. No, the book inspiration came from a fun ADHD moment of I was planning out some kind of long form instructional video work for the next little while, because I've been doing YouTube videos 1 to 3 times a week for over a year now. I've got I think over 100 videos on YouTube, something like that. Don't quote me. I had to look back and see. And I wanted to make some long form instructionals for the different arts that I teach, of either particular elements that are important things I want to make sure get passed on, or maybe broken down that might be challenges for people. And as I was doing that, I thought about some of the ways in which I've, I don't think I'm doing anything super, super special in the way that I kind of approach from a logical progression teaching wise. But at the same time, I'm very individual focused in what that journey looks like. And I was talking with, Corey Green, who's a karate instructor, who's got lots of awesome history with his teaching and working with people with disabilities and stuff. But kind of what we were saying is we do adaptive work, not in a lowering the expectations, but we work within capability. So I might have you do a technique that we work to help you do it the best you can, but I don't not teach you because I'm ruling out your capacity. I'm going to work with you to the highest level you can do. And then if we need to adjust something, I have a student with Bell's palsy, so half of her body isn't getting the messages that the other half is. And so we adapt things for her to help her still do everything that she can, but we don't necessarily take a ton of stuff off the plate and say this is equivalent to this rank. It's more like we're going to teach you in a way that you can use what your physical attributes are, and coordination is able to do. See where we can help you grow in that to ability. We're not going to make you do something you can't do, but we're not going to say that it's impossible per se. We'll see what's there and work with you on where that level is, and from there, you will have something that will be to the level and discretion of the rank that you're going for. So every belt doesn't necessarily look exactly the same, but they will have a certain level of mechanics and understanding for what they can do. So for me, it's you're not just learning a bunch of techniques and collecting techniques isn't the belt progression. It's what's your knowledge, your technical improvement, and you're going to be that belt, not just wear it.
So all right. So was part of the inspiration from basically your student base, working with folks that either autistic or on the spectrum or physical? I mean, when I had my school, I had school for 10 years, and 2002 to 2012, and yeah, it was some of my most rewarding students were ones who had challenges.
Yeah.
And I had a few, and this going back again, like 2002, where a lot of this subject matter wasn't really being talked about. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It was
And
2002.
yeah. What's that?
It was 2002.
Yeah, 2002. That's what I mean. So, and I was doing FMA and MMA. I was running the ITN as a pilot program, Action Life
Wow,
6.
okay. Yeah.
So, I couldn't tell you back then though, like they were getting benefits from crossing midline, all that. But what I did get feedback from the parents was, oh my God, my kid's doing better than in his PE class and gym. Now, mind you, I'm going to be honest, I couldn't told you back in 2002, 2004, it was attributed back then. But as I, started hearing other people talk about it, I'm like, wow, that was probably due to the angular move. They're like, I had one parent say, hey, my kid's a better point guard now because of the footwork and FMA, so.
Yeah. No, it's a big thing, and I'll kind of get more into my story that kind of helped build some of the method, but all that I use. A lot of it was stuff that was passed down from instructors that I worked with that, I'm taking this little bit here that works, this little bit here that works. Here's maybe a twist that I'll take on it. But, because I don't think I'm inventing anything that's never been done before, but it's always like, martial arts, the body can only move so many ways, but it's like, how does it move? What's the intent and the, kind of overall kind of working of it more than just the skeleton technique. So for me, I'm autistic and I have ADHD, and it's one where when I was growing up, the doctors didn't know what to do with me because there were two things. There's one is I was naturally very uncoordinated and struggled with a lot of physical movements. I was born very premature, very low birth weight. I was born at 27 weeks and I was 2 pounds, 2 ounces. Which is funny because I'm like 6'4" and 230 now, and you never would have guessed that.
You made up for it.
And I didn't come home from the hospital for a month because our lungs were underdeveloped, and I actually developed scar tissue on my lungs from how long I was on the ventilator just to live. And my sister got cerebral palsy and an intellectual disability. I didn't get the visible disabilities; I got the invisible ones. So what was really unique with me was I had some of the social emotional sensory things that at the time would have screened Asperger's. But I had something that we didn't understand until later years was I was hyperlexic. So that's where I understood words, vocabulary, reading, comprehension way beyond what my age was. So in first grade, it was one because when I first went into kindergarten, I melted down every single day by the end of the day. And it was more of an implode than an explode. So it was like you got made fun of for being the weird kid that's just breaking down over in the corner. And like I said, motor coordination was difficult. So I could read a book and speak really clearly, but you asked me to write and I didn't have the fine motor coordination to have decent handwriting. And they're like, why can you read this well and talk like this? But then you hold a pencil and I can't tell what you're doing. And that's the fun, sensory, spiky skill set that happens in different disabilities is that
it's with preemies. My twins were preemies. They were both born 2 pounds. My daughter was in the hospital for a whole year. I mean, so people, what you're talking about, it hits home with me because I see it with my son. My son can articulate on that. Handwriting, so difficult.
Yeah, I still can't do it. I type that was so much better because I still can't write well to this day. As much as I've tried, I just kind of
know. But so I'm piggybacking. This is real. Folks might be like, "What the hell is he talking?" But I mean, it's real. Being born that premature usually comes with a price.
Yeah,
yeah. My daughter was on a ventilator.
We both were, and my sister was on oxygen.
It's so surreal now when I look back because it's so far removed now. I mean, they were born in 2007.
Yeah, and I was born in '88, so medicine.
And so that's even probably was worse.
Medicine was not where it was in 2002. It's different.
Yeah.
There are so many more diagnostic things that we know now compared to back then. So really, it was like, I was the one that wasn't close to death. And when we got, further on, it's like, well, like you don't need a wheelchair or a walker, and you don't have a clear cognitive impairment. Because my
free to go.
Yeah, so like you're good. And like because some of the external things looked weird but passable enough, and I
get thrown in the mix.
One area, they're like, "Oh, you just might not be trying hard enough. So like you need to try harder." And I'm like, "It ain't working." Like it's just I don't think it's clicking.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. What really kind of like threw me was when I was in first grade, and I also went to school real young. I started kindergarten at 4, and I turned 5 in October. And I think my mom pulled some strings with the principal to make that happen, because that shouldn't have been a thing. But she was like, "We can't keep him at home. He's reading everything, and he needs stimulation, and he needs the socialization." And I was not ready for that social aspect by any means. And that was part of the meltdowns at the end of the day. Was like I just kind of hit a threshold. And
the sensory, it's like
Yeah.
I don't understand the overloading. I mean, like I see with my son who's got it.
Yeah, and people don't get that it's not just a cognitive, like you feel sad or you feel angry, like it's a nervous system response. Like your nervous system can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I had a moment, and I was at a professional conference Thursday, and I had a moment during the keynote speaker where I'm just like, I need to remove myself from the room before I don't know what happens. So I just went back to my hotel room and kind of had a minute, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go back when I'm like, the electricity's not there anymore, like the physiological.
Yeah, he's got to check out too. People aren't. It's hard to really articulate, like, to the norm. I mean, to to the average layman, like what they go. Like, I don't even. I'm going to be honest. I'm not saying I even fully understand it.
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing, because what really threw me was when I was in first grade. All the things that were there before were still there, but it was the first time standardized testing was indicated. And I remember my particular test really kind of rocked some of the teachers, because they're like, here's this kid that we know this one part about him. He's struggling in a lot of other areas. And in first grade, I tested at a 6th grade level, because that's how high the test went. And for reading and like comprehension and stuff and vocabulary. But I was at or below in several other areas, and that really confused the heck out of people. So it was one where, in kind of grade school, like elementary end, I kind of went between, we're like, well, do we put them in the gifted program? Do we put them in the regular program? Do we put them in the special needs classroom for certain things? And I got all 3 different points. And it usually was settled that I would go to the regular classroom for a majority of the time for most things, and then occasionally I would go into the separate classroom for some extra assistance. And when I got to 7th grade, I switched schools. Mom was kind of like, well, new place, he didn't die going through 1st through 6th. So they kind of left all the accommodations that I used to have. And, middle school and high school was a bit of a struggle. And I got to college, and it was nice because I could just focus on my special interests and not all the other stuff that I was tripped up with.
That you were forced to take that you.
Yeah. When I got to grad school, I was living in the thing that I've been eating books of, and because I got into psychology my sophomore year of high school, and my fun was reading like theory books in high school, from like sophomore year till I got to college and actually had to take classes on it. So that's then I got to grad school, and I'm like, I already know half of this stuff, and it was just just where my kind of information rabbit hole was. And martial arts was the other one. That was like another one that I'm like, I could sit and long form talk about this and deep dive all day. And it wasn't
without being like having to leave the room or whatever. So
and it wasn't because it was easy. It was particularly because it was hard. Even though I've gotten where I've gotten rank wise, I didn't follow the normal 3-4 year black belt as most people. My first black belt in Hapkido took me 7 years. 3 years for the first couple of ranks, because that was when I was going back between Chicago and my undergrad. But when I moved here in 2010, where I could train consistently, I came in as an orange belt. So that's like 2 ranks in. It took me until 2015 to get my black belt, because I took pretty much about half the system, once I acclimated to the different way they did Aikido here, I did it okay, but it was one where, I'm a very high context communicator. Emotionally, I'm very intuitive, but logically, I really like to have things. I want all the little depth and details you can give me because it'll help me know how to replicate stuff. And if I don't get it, I'll fill in with whatever I think is the best answer, which may or may not be what you want. So that was the struggle coming up through the ranks as the level increased and the demand increased was I needed more time to get some of the coordination things down. And then for my upper ranks, because of the skill jump that was needed, I personally chose to take a lot longer at my last 3 ranks. My instructors were like, dude, you should test. And I'm like, no, like I'm not where I want to be. You say I'm ready from like I can do it. I want to do it where I'm confident in it. And right now, I don't think at the level I'm at, I'm going to have come out everything that I need to come out and not revert to like some old bad habits or fill in blanks, or maybe I can't focus long enough, or I have too many things going on outside where I can't consistently perform. So I didn't get my first black belt until 2015. I started Taekwondo in about 2013. I didn't get my black belt until 2019 for my first dan. When I was in NSI, am in NSI, I started in 2013, didn't get ranked until I was an apprentice instructor in 2017. So, a lot of other people are doing things a lot quicker. Valenciawak, I'm taking the slow boat as well because, I don't care about getting it fast. I care about getting it well. And I know that, I take a few more reps to get things, but once it clicks, because I had to spend so much energy internalizing it, I know exactly what I need to do as long as the focus doesn't go.
Yeah. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, so with all this being said, which is great stuff, by the way, and hopefully people that have challenges are listening to this. Okay, so just getting back to the book.
Yeah.
So obviously, your experience, your personal experience, seeing what some of the the population you're teaching.
Yeah.
So so just for the folks who are watching, like essentially, what is your book going to be about? What is the theme?
Okay, so I think it's good because I can definitely put in some FMA stuff here too. I'm talking about I was just describing it to some people at the conference I was at, where because there was a presentation by an autistic man who talked about his experience in services and going through school and adult life and what the internal experience is. And it pretty much wrecked the room. And this is a bunch of clinicians, from newbie clinicians to decades-long vets, who were just floored by hearing this man talk about what it was like on the inside. And it was funny because they were eating it up, and I was about to have a panic attack because I'm just like, this is too real. I need to go. But it was one where just the end is they got a view from the inside out that they hadn't probably seen before. Because you can work with someone, see something every day, but until someone who has or is in that situation can tell you what the experience is like, you're making inferences and summations and intuitions. So it's different when you're getting the direct explanation of what an internal experience is. My thing in the book is I'm going to focus on some of the processing elements because auditory processing, visual processing, interoception, proprioception, those are all different senses that may or may not be as strong, or oftentimes they can be hypersensitive. So sometimes it's not that you're not feeling something, it can be that you're having a hard time tuning in because you can't tune everything else out. Because when you can hear what frequency light bulbs are at, then a fan can really be a problem. or
you can't zone in on the one conversation because you're hearing the 3 other conversations.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to focus on your voice, but I'm hearing every other conversation, and it's or sensory wise, where it's like I don't do well with light touch. So like the casual greet you touch feels like when you get that rush down your spine of like, oh my God, what was that? But deep pressure, I enjoy more, and it's more comforting. So my son's that way. Like he, if you
so it's not like that deep pressure. Like we used to need the need Yeah, so this
Yeah.
is so like it's
Yeah.
like I'm kind of living it. Some of the stuff that you're talking about, with, like with
Mhm.
him.
Yeah, because my son, like, he doesn't want you to like just like pat him. He's like, I walk up to him, he's like, Dad, I put your hand on my head and squeeze it as hard as you can.
I know, and you're like, I
Crack it
know.
up. And that's just his fun. And he's very sensory seeking. So
Yeah, yeah.
on that element, you have the part of martial arts where it's like, okay, um if touch is, because it's not so much that it's aversive and that like I just don't want to do it. It's more like if it's not within these certain parameters,
Mm,
it's sending either a lot of messages or not enough messages, depending on how it's done. So that's where like the feel of things, you've got to get to it to a point where it's not just like walking yourself step by step, which is where usually I start. Every class that I'm learning a new technique or I go to a seminar where I really want to internalize something, I don't just note take because I want to go back and study it. That's how I'm going to learn it and internalize it, because I will visually see the motor pattern, but I physically might not replicate it the same way, because I might be missing gaps in the all the connectedness, because I'm there's a lot of moving pieces. So I will usually annotate a seminar, or if I'm learning a form, I write it out step by step, by something that I can say and do at the same time,
mm.
because that way I'll learn it properly. Because if I don't, then again, I'm going to fill in gaps in ways that might not be what's called for,
Gotcha.
or I might not be holding in the right way, and things might not be coordinated right. So, I really take the time to, write down a ton of things to be able to reproduce stuff. So when I teach it, because I've had to go through all that to learn it in the first place, I can give very action specific cues and body specific cues of what to do. So for someone who has more things going on sensory or awareness wise, that gives them something to focus in on. And for someone who's typical, they can run with it because
Mm.
they don't have those same hurdles.
So in essence, is the goal of your book, everything you're describing, what's going to kind of be in there? Is it
Yeah.
the
It's that
help
internal experience helping people who are not neurodiverse learn what that internal experience is like. Because
or
I'm
teach better, potentially teach better if they
actually
have?
teach better, yeah. Because I think that awareness of what, not just like, oh, I taught, an autistic kid this, and so this is what I'm going to teach the next autistic kid. I'm like, the speaker that I met on Thursday, his name was Russell Lehman, and he had a great quote where he said, I'm one autistic person. I'm not every autistic person. I'm not all of autism, but autism is me. It's not a hat I can take off. It's part of the fabric, but at the same time, there's a depth in its presentation. So it's one where there might be certain elements that are really good kind of ground rules, but then there's going to be some person-specific stuff when you get to tease apart what that individual might need to fully like adapt things to where they can do it, in a comfortable manner. So you don't want to be learning in a panic mode or feeling unsafe or overstimulated. You want to do it in a way
So
that keeps that arousal down.
yeah. So is this something like your goal would be like other teachers would get this book to help them facilitate a better
Yeah.
environment for
Yes.
teaching? I think it's okay. All right, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, because that's one where everybody I've interviewed so far, and I've interviewed two or three people who are autistic and ADHD as well, and have other like mental health things. I've talked with a couple people and some stuff coming up who also have diagnoses, and then I talked with an instructor who has taught for 27 years and has been very successful with his methods for working with people of all different abilities.
Mm.
And the common thread was, there are things environmentally, there are things in the way that you present language. There are elements that might seem helpful, or something might be helpful, but it might not be supportive. Because help is, advice giving is what I think you should do. Help is, here's an idea of what I have could be helpful, or maybe has some efficacy behind it from past things, but it might not be situation specific, or might meet the need of that individual in that moment. It might be a best practice, but might not be, again, the prescription for what's needed. As where support is looking from that person's view, how do I facilitate them getting from their point A to a collective idea of what point B is. So their goal in a way they can digest and process in a mode that they can understand and feel confident in, that meets the expectation.
I think it's great. I think what you're doing, I think the potential, I think, is extraordinary as far as future, like an aid for, for teachers, that have, a mixed population of kids. I mean, it's no secret that, there's the increased autism, and which and there, I don't, I think it's all food related, but I don't want to cause, I mean, you know what I mean? I think there, but, wow. So how far, okay. So where are you at? Like, I guess, far as,
So I'm in the kind of collecting data stage. So I
okay.
put out that response last Friday, and I was on the phone computer nonstop until Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You just
At
got
that
swamped.
point, my brain was completely burnt out for the
Yeah.
weekend.
You got swamped with, like, so
Yeah,
what did you get swamped with? Requests to help
yeah,
or,
request to participate. I
okay.
got your email saying I suggested you an interview, and I got your wife. He messaged me saying, "What can we do to help out?" And I got so many people. Some people I knew, some people who were like across the world saying, "I saw this. I'm in Germany. Like, let me, I can contribute."
It's great. Better than like getting nothing, right? I mean,
And it was an overall excitement because when you're doing something like this, what I've seen, because I'm a clinician, I've worked particularly with dual diagnosis for 6-7 years straight. Before that, I did DCS work and did a lot of dual diagnosis there because that was just what I did well. Pediatrics, like my kind of specialty. And then before that, I was doing my internship and practicum for my master's. But anyway, as a practitioner, people really do well when someone has an insight, not to, like, again, the prescribed, like, oh, this is like a general best practice, because that might be good for most of the population. But when you're dealing with certain things specifically, it's good to know what that internal state is like, and understand that language from that person's view, because it's very, I'm very particular on like word choice and hearing how people say things and seeing, how congruent the body language is with um, the verbiage they're doing, because that'll tell you a whole lot about where someone's at. And it's one where, especially when you get to long form, kind of long standing diagnoses. So when you're dealing with developmental disorders, personality disorders, which is mental health more, but, or like physical disabilities or intellectual disability, again, that's a hat you can't take off. Autism, you can mask it. It's not healthy for you, but you can mask it. And that's what a lot of people, including myself, would do growing up, because it got you in less trouble, but it was extremely taxing, exhausting wise, trying to put on a costume for someone you weren't. And usually most people hit autistic burnout at some point, and that they can't mask anymore because it's just too draining. I've been in that point for a couple of years now where I'm just like, I just can't do it anymore. And people are just going to get more unmasked presentation. So with that, the point I'm trying to bring that to is when you see it from that lens, because for all those clinicians, like I said, you had decades-long practitioners hearing this guy talk about his experience, and these people have spent years and countless hours around the same diagnosis he has, but they learned things they had never thought about before because they hadn't heard it from the mouth of, the source itself.
so interesting. So is this a culmination where you're going to get obviously some people that are on the spectrum or whatever?
Yeah. So like,
and you're getting
other things like that. Yeah. And I'm getting, my call for like teachers is like, I don't want just a teacher who's met one person. I want someone who's, even though I'd be welcome to talk to them about their experience, but, I'm looking for people that have like long-standing teaching careers, or, even maybe they're not long-standing, they've kind of really gotten in the deep water with the population and kind of what their experience is. So I'm not looking to give a prescription. That's a bigger work for another day. I'm looking to give insight to inner experience. And from hearing that inner experience work. And, with that, there'll be probably a little bit of neuroscience stuff in there, just explaining, what's this that they're talking about? Like, what's the difference between interoception and proprioception? What are the sensory things, and kind of how does the brain work in putting that together so people can realize, because sometimes people think it's a choice. And a lot of times it's one where it's like, this is more of a nervous system arousal thing, or this is more of a brain structure thing, or this is more of a cognitive processing line that's different. Not necessarily better or worse, but just a different natural route that people with, these diagnoses might do that might be foreign to someone who's typical. But understanding those things is very helpful to get how that person is receiving information. So when you give information, you can give it in a way that's going to connect better.
So I guess my question, I think what you're doing is just so novel in many regards. I guess my question would be, let's just say, like, for your, like, okay, so such and such have a school. Not only they're going to help you with it and give their input or whatever from experience, either whether they are on it or they teach folks, that have some disabilities. Would the average layman be able to, I know you haven't written the book yet, but is the goal where the average layman teacher can actually get something from this to help them without having a master's degree, like such as yourself in there, but it would be easy enough for them, easy enough digestible read where they can actually get benefits from it and further, be able to assist and help, teach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's one where I'm not looking at writing an academic text. I'm not.
No, and I wasn't suggesting. Yeah,
I'm not trying to get published in a journal with this. That'd be awesome for like the field.
Well, you never know, though.
You never know. But that's not my initial goal. Maybe some other point, fancy it up for the APA. But it's one where, the initial goal is, relatability. Being able to create a connection, intimacy, and empathy with someone else's experience to impact their service delivery. So it's one where, I don't have to give you an academic text to teach you emotional closeness, like when going to counseling, teach you what emotional contact is like. I don't have to go through a long laundry list to have you practice active listening. These are some foundational skills, like, in counseling. So the same way in martial arts, I don't have to reteach you how to teach. I'm taking elements of things you already know and connecting it to a different understanding of someone else's reality to adjust those things to be more palatable and easily to receive for the person in the situation. So sometimes for people that can be rooting things from the ground up, because they might be very old style, hard way, militant.
I think
that might not, that's really stressful for a lot of people.
I think, and I don't think you're gonna get them as consumers. Let's just be honest, right? They're just so in their own.
They got their way. That's what they're gonna do. And they don't care about the other stuff. But again, that's not for them, unfortunately, because it's one where
right. But I think you're gonna get.
You're not growing.
More obviously younger, open-minded teachers who obviously teaching kids. Right? If obviously, you're not
going to get adults too, because all the people I've interviewed so far were adult practitioners.
And we're also.
I've got some people who are younger on the list that are going to be interviewed, but I've got some.
I'm just thinking from a perspective from school owners. You're going to get mostly from that kids.
Kids.
And I don't. What's your point? There's obviously adults out there that could obviously benefit from this. But
because I have a buddy who he's paraplegic. He got shot in the neck as an 11-year-old and can't use below his legs or below his waist. But he did some FMA stuff when he was I forgot what age it was, but basically as part of his recovery, he did some Filipino martial arts because his doctor said that'd be super helpful. Another friend of mine got into he's another instructor, in Hapkido and Filipino martial arts. He got into a car accident really bad. And he was like an accomplished martial artist when that happened, and
Mm,
he got a brain injury and a neck injury. And so he had to kind of build back his processing ability. They
yeah.
said, doing the Sinawali patterns was like one of the best things you could do.
Awesome.
Because
Yeah. That's what
those,
they say. I know.
yeah,
I
it's going to keep
know.
those neural connections healthy, and especially when you have bilateral stimulation in that facet, that increases the brain, kind of solidifying those motor neurons working. So, it's one where there's a saying, neurons that fire together wire together, and when that happens, that increases speed of recall and processing. So with that, you've got so much that you can do, especially I think with FMA, for the coordination aspect and processing. And it's one where there's a lot of moving pieces, can be overwhelming at first, but building that level of body awareness, because especially
Mhm.
when you consider proprioception, there's a graphic in psychology that we call the homunculus of the brain, where basically it shows kind of like across the perimeter or the outskirts of the brain, how much of the brain is being used for different sensory areas. And
Okay.
so, what do you think the biggest ones are?
As far as century goes, ooh, I can guess, but go ahead.
So the feet and hands.
Feet
And
and hands, as far as
feet
this.
and hands and mouth are some of the biggest ones.
Makes okay. Okay.
And then you go through like, kind of your other senses and other parts of the
Your
body.
smell, taste, and
Yeah, that,
okay.
become
Yeah.
less, kind of the things that are really needed for survival first are your largest sensory organs.
That
So
makes
your
sense.
feet,
Hands,
that's in contact with the ground and walking. Your hands, that's perceiving so many things. You consider what the hands are able to do. Not looking at something, you can touch an item and tell whether it's solid, liquid, granular,
mm,
viscous or not, with no visual input, but it's all by touch through the hands or through the feet. And so you've got a ton of nerve endings in those areas, and you've got other things you're going on in different senses. But it's one where because of that, you have this kind of base idea of what you're taking in, nervous system wise, and kind of how much of the brain is dedicated to those different things. But also in people with different disabilities or neurological things going on, that sensory map can be hyper or hypo aroused. So, like on one end, like myself, I'm more like easily hyper aroused. Like I feel stuff a lot quickly, and like I know, I can notice like I'm really sensitive to temperature. Again, touch. It's like it better be a deep touch, because a light touch is going to be like kind of someone like tapping a nerve really quick. Uh,
mm,
where a deep touch is like a firm, like solid signal. And so it's one where, um, that is one where, again, I have that like kind of more hypersensitivity thing, which was funny because I don't have that same thing with pain. I've played soccer matches with dislocated joints and broken feet,
gee.
and finished the match. And it was
I
one where
yeah.
I thought I had a bad jam. And I take my shoe off, and my toe is like,
Ooh.
in the X-ray, it was over the second joint and twisted. Played 25 minutes on a
And it's
dislocated joint.
wow.
I knew something was wrong, but I'm like, it's not bothering me. But that's again hypersensitive to what happened, but not necessarily getting the same pain signals, because those are two different things between
That's
sensation.
true. I mean, like, yeah, like I got headbutted really hard one time in the chest, stick messing around stick fighting with somebody, and I kept going. But yeah, I mean, and then like little I know, I probably had like a cracked rib or something.
Yeah, no, I got in my car, drove myself to the hospital, and said, "Hey, my foot's messed up." And they were like, "You drove yourself here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, can you fix it?" And they were like, "Oh, okay." Meanwhile, my wife doesn't feel anything, like super hypo aroused. Still doesn't
Mm,
like touch, but like she only registers really intense stuff. So,
okay.
she's more like has more of a processing disorder than like hyper arousal. So for her, she had a couple of herniated discs that she had been walking around for a minute, and
Ooh.
she's had torn muscles or ligaments that she didn't know until a good while after it was that to that extent. because she just looked like, oh, that just sucks, but like it wasn't. It just wasn't signaling
right away. Wow,
Yeah.
that can be dangerous though. Like like you're actually
Yeah,
got like,
it's
pretty
extremely.
significant, and you're just like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Before you know it, it's
yeah, she had a torn bicep and didn't know it.
yeah, that could be that
Like,
could
I
be
got
bad.
this knot in my arm. I don't know what's going on. Went to a massage therapist, and they're like, "You totally like tore this. Like, I can get it like close back together, but like this is gonna take a minute to heal, and stuff like that." So yeah.
Here's a culprit that headbutted me. He's
Mhm. Oh,
he's
yeah,
denying he's denying culpability.
yeah. Yeah, cracked ribs or something, because I got a cracked rib in Muay Thai once. Just took a switch knee just right from the guy I was sparring with. And I'd taken knees a billion other times before that, and that one time the shit was right, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's a bruise. Day goes by, I'm like, still kind of sucks, but maybe it's just a deep bone bruise.
Yeah, or yeah, whatever.
Another
Yeah,
2 days go by, and I'm like, something might be wrong, because this shouldn't be like this. And I did the old tuning fork method, where you take a tuning fork and stick it to the bone that you think is broken. And I went on one side where I'm like, okay, this is like a healthy side. Feel nothing. Okay, that's what I should feel if it's not broken. And then I'm like, ding it again, put it on the side I think it's cracked. I'm like, oh, yep, that's broken. Yeah, that was how I knew I had a cracked rib, because I'm just like, this kind of sucks. It hurts when I move. But yeah, that was it. But I was like walking around on it, and I think I went back to sparring one other session before then, and then it was the next one that I said, like, yeah, something's really wrong. And then I sat out for like maybe 6 weeks before I was back at it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's, you gotta be careful, right? And
Yeah.
bruised my ego once, took months to heal.
Yeah, those ego hits can really be devastating. I think that's called trauma. When you have
Renee's and
you have a situation happen, and you keep reliving that situation compared to.
He's in. He might be good for your book. He's in rare form tonight.
Yeah, but no, this is all like stuff where I'm kind of going to get into elements like this. What I'm talking about, like the differences in proprioception and kind of awareness in space, and just kind of giving examples of people doing that. Because one of the guys I talked to, he has a visual motor processing delay, so he sees something, but there's a delay between the input and when his body will move. But as I said before, he's an instructor in Balintawak. How's a guy who sees things and his body takes a second to start?
Especially in Balintawak, when you're that close and you're just
and he's a level 6, so that's a complete
level 6.
and like body, he moves well, and it's one where how does he do that? Well, he goes by feel, and he goes by he's done it. He kind of did what I did, where his upper ranks, he spent a lot more years and time of those last few ranks to be able to build that coordination and trust the body movement and adapt to that visual stimulus, because he's also visually kind of hyper sensitive. So like light is like you got to wake up in the morning and get used to the light outside for him, and and he also has misphonia. Misphonia is the kind of hypersensitivity to sound. So it's one where, like, he was saying he's the human RTM, which is like a rating for like frequencies, and he can get within 3 to 4 frequencies of whatever pitch he hears, compared to like the machine. And so like he's a sound engineer because he can accurately.
Wow, just think about, you got a disability, but yeah, man, it gets you this incredible job, because you can.
The downside of that is big places, lots of people, has to wear earplugs, because it's like overwhelming. But like in his field, he's like, oh, I can use this to an extent. I like teaching because I can info dump in a socially appropriate manner.
Yeah. No, I mean, I commend you on what you're doing. So okay, so you got folks who are willing to help, whatever facet there. So what's the next? I mean,
what's the next step?
Outline, or like
so I'm collecting the interviews now, like just started this past week, and kind of noting common threads, and because I kind of want to break down the book into sections of like, discussing some of those different internal sensory things and kind of what the journey was like for different people. So using like quotes or blocks of like a transcript on discussing that experience to kind of give an informative view of what all is going on internally, doing some of those standard motions. So it could be doing a Sinawali pattern for FMA. It could be doing moving to a form for traditional art. It could be what grappling feels like for someone, and you kind of knowing where like it's not just move here, do this. It might be spelling out all these different things. Like for me, I would to learn something, I'd have to write it down, but I might be like, okay, like I need to stand with my foot this direction, this foot going this direction, sink the hips this way, bend the knees here. I'm going to pivot, contracting this area, and make sure the shoulders go with it in a certain way. And then when I move, I have to make sure I'm relaxed until this point. And like I said, it's a very detailed step thing first learning, and I have to go super slow to get it, because if I go quick, the scaffold's going to fall apart. Something's not going to connect or work together. But like once I get it, I'm not doing as much deep thinking, even though I do a lot of those kind of do this, or I notice something off and I'm like, do this, I'm constantly telling myself how to do stuff. But when it gets to the point where, I was talking with the guy in Walk, where you're, instead of doing that like long mental coaching where you're just feeling and making minor adjustments, that's where you can really run with it, because then you're working off of a different type of memory and a different type of strength of connection. So you can move more efficiently in that sense. It doesn't take as much cognitive work, even though it still does take work. I'm not saying it gets
no, fair enough. So,
effort, but it's easier than it was before.
Okay, so interviews.
So I'm doing the interviews first. I'm writing down kind of the common themes to kind of go with like preliminary chapter ideas. And then, once I get a certain level of, kind of certain mass of interviews, then I'm going to go toward, the full on copywriting. And, I'm thinking it's going to take, I'm going to be collecting data for a while, because I don't want to do it, little, like sample size of 20. I want to make sure it's, good enough sample size to give enough collective experiences to say, I had 50 people give this, same thing, or I had 80% of my interviewees said this about this particular experience, and things like that. So enough mass to make a thing. Chapter one will be kind of what is neurodiversity, and describing some of the basics of the way that cognitive processing and sensory processing might be different. Not necessarily, I'm going from a very neuroaffirming model, so I don't say, oh, here's this person's deficits, and here's where they suck at this, and here's how you cure the disabled person, because that's good old 1920s medical language. But it's one where I'm going to go more like, here's how this person experiences the world, or can potentially experience the world differently. And now I'm going to give you a view of what some of those different particulars are like from the words of people who've done it and gone through it. And not just, students or active students, but also people who currently teach who have this. What are their things they picked up along their journey that's helping them better teach or make them effective at teaching. And that's where I can get into like instructors who've worked with it a longer time as I go through these different elements. And then it'll be kind of the, again, not a prescription on what to do, but kind of boiling down what is kind of the summary of it, to be able to give, like, people can come to their conclusions on their own, but I've given the data.
And it's a great intro, though, so they can get a little background of like what you're going to be doing. I mean,
so many people they hear what autistic is.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily they understand.
Yeah, they might. Some people don't experience autism. Might be they watched Rain Man in the 90s, and it's
that might be exposure
to, so, or it could be lots of different things, and so it's one where kind of giving the idea of like, this is sort of some different manifestations you can see, or this is some of the common areas that it impacts, or where it may make things again, you have hyperarousal, hypoarousal, differences in connection, and interfacing between different systems. And so taking that all into account and then describing like, what is this experience like for this particular area from the mouth of the people who are doing it. So that way, that's where people can get a view of the experience, which is what really impacts, I think, individuals trying to look at improving their methods. So when I could tell you, I almost was going to start a rant on some stuff, but I will not go there. That's for another forum. That's for a professional conference next year. I will definitely do it there. But what I was going to say is you can get, medically, there are, for a long time, it was, the experts or the people with the PhDs who did observation, came up with a theory, therapy, idea, process that achieved an objective outcome that they deemed as productive or positive, or did what they intended to do or not intended to do. Because sometimes it informs in a positive way, and sometimes it's like, well, this panned out totally backwards, so don't do this. It's the fun intellectual honesty of research. But with this particular one, it's going to be more that inside out perspective. So instead of hearing an outside observer say, I've been around hundreds of this diagnosis and this is what I found or this is what I observed, it's going to be, here's a lot of people who have it telling you what their experience is. So you're hearing it from the mouth of the people who are going through it, what these things that people commonly do, or common structures for class, or common methods for training, or ways they had to adapt training to, what was their experience and what was the outcome, or how did it make them feel? How did it make them learn? How did they maybe have to change things because it didn't help in their learning? What was the overall experience in the common layperson's, school? And, what were things that were helpful in dealing with these particular different issues? And, everyone I close with like, what was one thing that you wish you had? Or what's one thing someone new starting out who's wanting to go on this journey, or someone maybe is in it, what's something that you think they should hear from you and your experience?
Oh, that's a nice conclusion. Or, I mean, at the end, like, yeah, that's a nice way to tie it up. So when do you think, okay, because I like to, when you get it done, I mean, I would love to bring it back on, but like, if you had like an timeline, like
probably, I'm going to be doing interviews for a minute because, again, I want to have a certain amount of people threshold. I don't want it to be 10, 20 people. I want as many as I can collect and not overwork my schedule. But, I'm going to probably start copywriting soon for some of the more informative psychoeducation elements and like ends, because that's going to take some research and sources to make sure people just don't think I'm talking out of my, again, but it'll be like, here's what the science says on this. And then I get to fill in the blanks with real people of like, this is what the experience of it is. Because some people, like, as I was going before, their experience or depth of knowledge with a particular word or diagnosis might be one person they met, or it might be an idea because they've not met a person with that, or they might have some misconceptions due to some rumors or ideas. But someone with the actual diagnosis can tell you what the experience is like and kind of clear up some of those things. It's like the old stereotype that autistic people don't feel emotions or aren't highly emotional. And the more common answer is there's usually a strong sensitivity to emotion, and usually the lesser outward display might not be a lack of emotion, but it might be that there's a lot of things going on. There might be some overwhelm, and you kind of hit to a certain point where a lot's coming in, so you sort of shut down or restrict to not go into that over point. It's not necessarily always a healthy thing, but it's one where when you're trying to, again, maintain a certain level of below threshold nervous system arousal as part of the day, you start the day with so many spoons, you got so many resources to use in different areas, something might have to give to make the executive function work in other areas. Or it could be, I do this, but my executive function might suffer because of it. And so, some people I know, who are autistic are extremely emotive. My son's one of those. He's sometimes very stoic, but like when he's in his element, he's super, super expressive, and he's very clear communicator, even though he's non-speaking, because you know where he's at just about all times if you know him. But it's kind of one where again, that's kind of busting the stereotype, because it's like it's not so much that again, it might not be the typical social cues for display, but it might be an adaptive way for that person to survive in a typical world. Because you have to really think that, the way that, when you're dealing with some differences in neurology and differences in sensory experience, it's kind of like you're in imagine like, I usually compare it to, it's like asking someone who might have walking difficulties to walk in a particular way that's unnatural. They might do a really good approximation, but they might not necessarily, even if with the best like imitative ability, it might go against what their nerves are saying do, or it might go against some natural patterns that might be easier or more functional for that person. Or very common thing with bonding. Someone might say like, oh, that ADHD person or autistic person just info dumped at me, or they just I told them a story I was going through, and they gave me a similar story of what they were going through. And so were they trying to one up me or take the spotlight? But often in neurodiverse communication, there's a longing for intimacy. And so usually instead of just a like, I feel this way for you, which can be a very good thing, it's the empathetic response is like, I feel you're going this way, standard empathy in a typical way. But empathy might be displayed as, oh yeah, I went through this thing that's very similar to what you went through. So instead of one-upping, it's a way of saying, I've lived this and I understand from this parallel experience. So it's a way of connecting in depth. Because usually you will also very much see, at least in most of my practice, is there's usually a want for deeper relationships rather than surface ones, and usually a want for direct and meaningful communication than social dance. Because the other one is reliant on solid information, openness, vulnerability, and congruency, compared to more typical communication. Not knocking it, but like typically it might be going, and it's like, okay, I have to run through these checklists of things before I get to this kind of information, or offering this opinion, or sharing this info, which means I have to interpret all of these little signals that may or may not be direct to arrive at maybe the best fit solution. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of things when you're balancing on, dang, the
lights. A lot of work where you're doing, I mean, just what you're describing, what you're planning to do. I mean,
that's a lot of work. And when you're, like I said, when you're dealing with other sensory things, and there's a cognitive process that's rolling that's contrary to how you normally process, that's a ton of work. And
here's the guy here, James, Brent Pierce, just mess right here. Somebody that you might want to maybe touch base with. And he's a lifelong martial artist with autism, wrote a book, My Gift, My Curse. Edward, what's his sick? I believe.
It says Andrew Edward Wissick.
Yeah, so that might be somebody worth reaching out to.
Yeah, I'm going to take a picture of that.
Matter of fact, Brent, if you...
Yeah, Brent messaged me on Facebook.
I was going to say, yeah, exactly.
That's perfectly easy way. Or you can email me at Guardian Martial Arts Studio at gmail.com. All one thing together.
Would it be okay if he sent to you via messenger on here?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Because I can copy and paste the text.
Brent, if you need, just let me know where.
I took a picture of it, but
okay, perfect. All right, good enough.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so it's one where there's all those elements. Like I said, when it comes to martial arts, you have to think, what are some things in the room that may or may not be conducive for that person's learning, given some of those environmental factors. And some of those things, a lot of people who are, have disabilities are no stranger to finding ways of adapting things themselves, because they've had to survive, or they've had to, or a lot of times what you see is, like you say, some people who are really out and about, they usually have a lot of support. Some people might be out and about on their own, but they
there's a support system, right?
But like it's one where everybody needs a support system, and when you're dealing with certain tasks, activities, or whatnot, it might be helpful to have a support system. But it's one where just generally, I know for me, like, I did a lot of things on my self-interest, but I usually needed a certain level of support to be able to process it in a way that made it work well for me, or else I was going to keep repeating a lot of the same stuff. And that's not that, intellectually I might have gotten something, but, there's a difference between your semantic memory, which is details, which is your procedural memory, which is the how of what you're doing, which is different than your working memory, which is the recall of like it's staying in the forefront and then your RAM of like, this is your active processing, and you only have so much RAM before the computer slows down.
Yeah. There you go.
So yeah, that's and that gets into the whole theory of like fluctuating capacity, because like it's like, why could they do this today and they can't do it the next day? It's like, well, what did they come in with over the course of the day, or things in a different environment that may affect their capacity to process or enact things in this very moment?
So what do you think? I mean, with all this, a year? What do you think?
I'm shooting for a year to year and a half.
Year? I mean, that's fair. A year. So you're thinking like
that? My wife was like, it takes years to write a book, and I'm just like, yeah, but you underestimate my ability to hyperfocus and strong motivation.
So you're thinking like maybe
that's a big avenue to do a lot of really impressive things.
No. I mean, what you're doing is, so were you thinking late 225, early 220?
Late 20. I'm shooting November, December 25 at earliest. Maybe turn of the year.
26.
We want to get it out. It might not take that long. It might take longer. It depends on.
No, yeah. So what I'd like you to do, I do got to go.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can keep me posted, I would love to bring you back on once the book is done. I mean, I think that would be like seeing, like you came on talking about it, and then like the final product. You know what I mean? There. So, by all means, I mean, please, put your, just the whole process, evolution. I mean, don't hesitate to share an FMA discussion. I think it'd be neat just seeing a long chronological timeline.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Your work.
Yeah, definitely do that, because it's one where there's one of my kind of side goals with this is, as I get certain sections done and I get chapters done, I'm gonna probably do like some small synopsis PDFs on that particular topic.
I think that'd be really neat,
like an infographic series, or a small, like, maybe 5.
I think it'd be nice too, like snack bites where people can
something digestible they can use. Because my classes, I usually say, like, I want them to leave doing one thing better, and I want them to leave with one thing they can use today that they're confident in. So same thing with the kind of smaller bites as the chapters get done.
And plus use leak out there, so like somebody maybe could use something before the whole book comes out. I think that would be good.
And it's just considerations, because I mean, it's one one perspective. My other people that I'm getting is trying to broaden that perspective, showing either collective similarities or unique differences in how things can present. But either way, that data is going towards showing trends in some ways. And
if you do that,
think about it.
Please share in the group. You know what I mean? Like, please don't hesitate. I mean, there's 17,000 there. I'm not saying all 17,000 participate, obviously, but still, there's enough in there that you might like draw an interest in there. But this has been awesome. I really go ahead.
Yeah, and that's one where definitely again, if I can spark insight into experience that impacts the output they have in their teaching and considerations, and like maybe they did something
fantastic,
much awareness, and now they're like, oh, maybe I should be thinking about how I do this.
I think it'd be incredible. I think
you're going to have in their experience in martial arts. So it's one of the biggest things, because the last thing I'll leave with is, in counseling, there are two big factors. One is as far as efficacy, is not the exact theory that you use. So it's like, my style is better than your style. I'm like, it depends on the practitioner. But it's one where, the theory is not the most relevant thing in counseling. A lot of literature will say this theory is studied and has empirical knowledge behind it. That means they got some valid, or I should say reliable results, not necessarily valid. So reliability is the consistency at which it happens. Validity is how true it measures what it means to measure. And you can have some really reliable measures. They might not be valid measures. Like the GRE is a great example. Awesome bell curve. That's why they use it for a standardized test for grad school. Doesn't necessarily show how smart you are, but it produces a nigh perfect bell curve. So it's a really good standardized tool for some people. Is expectation. Some people absolutely hate it. It depends on where you're at in research tools. But in that, the installation of hope is one of the biggest things, because if someone can't see themselves doing it, if you can't visualize it, if you can't see that process as a possibility, that's not a door they can walk through.
Nice. Wow.
But on the other end, there's also, again, more than I think Steve DeShazer was he's a big in solution focused theory, which is one of my roots, because I also do motivational interviewing, and those are both solution focused based. MI is used highly in the addictions world, but it's one where it's not the theory that you use. 80% of what they studied when they did that study was based on the congruence and the strength of the relationship with the facilitator. So
that kind of would equate to teacher/student. I mean, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a common saying in developmental, and is that rules without relationship don't work, because the relationship gives the context and the strength of the why and how, instead of just the do this. And so if you have someone who can be hopeful in their process, and they trust the connection they have with the person who's there to, again, not just help, because help can be anything. I can help you by giving you this fidget cube, but you might not know what to do with it, or you might be like, that's nice, but that doesn't click for me. But again, if I give you support, which is your specific, from your experience, the way you want to receive aid, in a trusting relationship that you're hopeful in, then we can make lasting change.
Nice. Well, I'm wishing you best of luck with this. I think it's great, and definitely want to hear the process you're going through. Whatever you feel free to post in the group. I would love to see, like, the whole, just the process. Yeah. Like,
it'll get out there.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my weekends for the next long while.
Well, hey, it's a great thing.
It's a good pastime to have. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the platform and getting the exposure out there. And
all right, but post your stuff in there, please. Folks want to. Folks want to see.
I need to go to the chat thing. Where's the chat thing? I see public, host chat. Communicate with host and other guests. Okay. So yeah. Type it in.
Oh, there you go.
If I can type. Okay. So yeah, they can message my school on Facebook, or me personally, or personal James Arthur Shepard. Can't type my own name. On Facebook. So yeah, that would be good. Either one of those avenues, the email, messenger, that'll make sure I get it, because I can go back and look at it. So either one of those, either messaging the school or messaging myself or emailing me at the school. That's how everybody's been contacting me for this. That's my favorite way to do it. My phone number, I use that for work and for everything else. But if you want to just email me or shoot me a message with whatever input you want to give, that's very much appreciated.
Awesome. All right, James, I appreciate it coming on, and wish you the best of luck with it. And please stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Hey, you take care.
All right, you too.
All right, bye. And that wraps up 498. Who's next? Hopefully Evan, Western Piper guy, Medusa. We're going to get him on. Could be Tuesday or Friday. And the big episode 500, which is going to be Sunday, November 3rd. Tom Sotis is actually going to interview me. So that should be really exciting. But that'll, of course, will be pending FMA discussion and like everything else. So stay tuned. And those who watch tonight, thank you. And we'll see you. Could be Tuesday or Friday.